So I don't get to watch TV much, but I did get to watch this. And I'm going to tell you, because I know a lot of people didn't like it, I'm going to tell you why I have really loved the most recent season of The Bear from a narcissistic abuse perspective. Now, I know a lot of people weren't thrilled by that season or felt it was more of the same. I really love the characters. I really love the show. So maybe them behaving the same way they always do feels like a familiar place. That's me. I love the show. Okay? And I'm going to be spoiling, so that's why I held off on releasing this video. So if you plan on watching it but haven't yet, just a heads up, please. But I think many people who really were big fans have watched it. But I have to say, if you do watch The Bear, there is a bigger message here for survivors of antagonistic, toxic, and narcissistic relationships. The reason I really loved The Bear, not the chefing and the love stories and all that, it's because there was a survivor message here that really was well told and that mattered for anyone who has been through a narcissistic relationship or family or other subjugated relational place. So if you haven't watched the show, this may not make much sense, but there's a character named Carmy. And Carmy is the genius Wonder Boy chef. And as the story tells it, he's one of the very best chefs in the entire world. He came from a very emotionally abusive and meshed household, had a very emotionally dysregulated mother who also seems to have some form of alcoholism or alcohol abuse disorder. And the shockwaves of her behavior and her alcoholism and all of that devastatingly hurt all three of her children. It was a lifelong contributor to a lifelong mental health issue and sort of a stuckness at home for her eldest son, who died by suicide, for the daughter, who struggles with anxiety and her sense of self, and then Carmy, the chef, who honestly looks like he has a mix of complex trauma, fallout of narcissistic abuse, and the common fallout we see in children of addicts. Now, in the last episode of the season, here starts the spoiler, so just telling you, in the last episode of this season, Carmy says he's going to step away from being a chef, and he hands over the reins of the restaurant to Sydney, his second in command, his sister, and Richie, a cousin of his who runs the restaurant. Carmy did what most survivors of chaotic, invalidating, unsafe environments do. Carmy never fully developed his sense of himself as a whole person, but yet he still became something that worked really well in the world or for the world. Frankly, what Carmy did was a form of dissociation, and he was so good at it that he became the best at the world at what he does. He was a chef, and being a chef occupied all of him. And by being a chef, he didn't have to feel, and he didn't have to have an identity separate from being a chef. And because he was so globally heralded for his chefing, there really didn't need to be the human being Carmy separate from being a chef. Now, when we, any of us, not just a character in a TV show, go through antagonistic and emotionally abusive relationships, particularly when we grow up in them, we become what allows us to survive. That thing we become typically isn't our true selves. It's a combination of trauma responses, attachment bids, and a way of showing up in the world where we are recognized and, above all else, safe. It allows us to regulate and, frankly, dissociate. In Carmy's case, he wasn't just a chef. He wasn't a cook. He was the best chef in the world. His emotional numbing and the chronic anxiety and fear that he experienced and showed all the time were sublimated into the art of the highest of high cuisine. In the cases of some of the people I have talked about narcissistic abuse with for decades, many of them are absolutely professional standouts, like literally the best of the best professors, artists, doctors, researchers, athletes. They were organized to a perverse level. They were hyper-focused parents. In these systems, which require us to silence our true selves to stay safe, our identities aren't who we are, but they are what we do. And as Carmy eloquently says at the end of the series, he says, "This is all I know. I don't know anything else." Doing as a form of dissociation is powerful, and we can get a lot of applause for it when we are competent, especially when we are really competent, like the best there is. Because when we're really, really competent and successful, everyone assumes we have it all together. For a Carmi-like person in the world, it's easier to be a precise, perfectionistic chef than it would have been to really lean into the work of being a person, to really address that question of who are you? What are you about? What do you like? What do you care about? What do you believe in? What matters to you? What are you afraid of? What brings you joy? This kind of exploration for an individual gets shut down if you are from a narcissistic family system or if you've spent many years in a narcissistic relationship. I have asked a lot of clients these questions over the years. And in the early days of my conversations and work with them, there was no answers. There was just simply the fear about exploring these answers, almost a sense of how dare I talk about these things. And then in some cases, over time, the answers to these questions of who are you and what are you about slowly get found. But to do that, to figure out who we really are, means giving up the scaffolds that allow us to appear hyper-competent and successful, and those things that become stand-ins for who we are. A chef is not a person, a chef is a chef. It is conceivable that someone like Carmi, that character, will remain a brilliant chef. He has the skills. But in an ideal world, he also has access to his emotions, to have had the opportunity to process his traumas, to integrate his experiences, and not allow them to define him, but instead to become a man who can love and love vulnerably, who can find balance in his life, who can love being a chef, but not the rigid, perfectionistic, cold world of haute cuisine, but instead can take those beautiful skills he has and cook something from the heart. But he has to find that first. All of us do. And his character is fascinating because you can really see he's trying. He's doing the things, going to Al-Anon meetings, exploring uncomfortable family conversations, and even having flashes of recognition that he has the love of a person, a really good person who sees him. And while The Bear and Carmi are a fictional TV story, these things we see can happen in real life. Survivors of these kinds of relationships and family systems do fall in love, and they do figure out who they are and stop pedaling faster and faster without really knowing who they are. We see Carmi's mother, interestingly, attempt to make amends with him. She, according to the story, has been sober for a year. She appears to be doing the work, going to the meetings, getting her help. And you can see he's still acutely triggered by his mother. When they finally sit down and have a conversation, he spoke to her the only way he could. He cooked for her and cooked an exquisite meal for her. And certainly those moments will help his healing and potentially hers, but ultimately, someone making amends doesn't wash away your somatic and psychological developmental harm of having had a parent like that. However, it may help him along this path of being something other than chef. Sadly, in the sort of quick fix, self-help, coachy culture we're in, we often view just getting on with it and doing, and being busy and posting successes on Instagram as meaning it's all good. Work and success, folks, though, are just another drug. And we can dig so deep into it as a way to avoid the pain that we don't know any other part of ourselves except the doer, succeeder, achiever part of us. You can't avoid the pain. The pain, it's a thief. And you either face it now or later. But this pain will always keep us from ourselves until we be with it, until we process it, until we understand how it sits in our bodies. You can be successful and simultaneously be a whole person that feels and loves and cares. It's not always easy, because if you're spending all that time loving and caring, you may not always be working. Something I really loved is that only one person cheered Carmi on for making this choice of stepping away from the restaurant. And that was the sister who had suffered every much as he had. Everyone else looked at him like he was nuts for walking away from this restaurant. Who steps away when they're at the top of their game, when they're the best? Perhaps love for a survivor that kind of love is really the person who can give you full permission to make this kind of publicly surprising shift without questioning you. She had gone through it. She got it. Most people don't. I don't run the network, but personally, I want another season because I'm rooting for Carmi, and I sure as hell hope these writers and producers get it right. But I also know a character like Carmi has an uphill climb. And really, I'm rooting for all survivors of narcissistic and emotionally abusive relationships. Because when we can finally give permission to who we are, separate from what we do and how we survive, that's when a life can begin. So whether you like the show or not, the message this show was able to communicate was a great one, and frankly, and often a rare one. And it was a tough one in a world that will always wonder why someone at the top of his game would step away. And the reason he did that was because it would literally be the only way he could save himself. The same applies for most of us too. Thanks again.